Hey guys, this is my review of Tenet, the new Christopher Nolan film. Kind of the big, first mainstream release post-lockdown, if you like, with cinemas slowly getting back into the swing of things. Very slowly, of course, and it's something that's been touted for quite a while. Originally it was meant to come out in July, but there was further delays, and it's, whichever way you look at it, it's one of the big releases of the year, one of the most talked about releases of the year, because a new Christopher Nolan film tends to be that. There's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of mystery surrounding it. I think he's one of those old school directors who likes to keep the audience guessing. Not just in the film itself, but in the run up and the anticipation. So the early trailers we got for Tenet or Tenet, I should say, were very kind of cryptic, very, just gave you a little bit here and there, not a whole lot to go on. And I actually went into this film pretty much like that, because I had not heard any reviews. I wasn't really sure about what it was about, to be honest, except that it being sort of compared to Inception, and that it was in that sort of a mould. Inception, 10 years old this year as it happens, which is hard to believe, but that's obviously one of the big films in Nolan's back catalogue, one of the true sort of I think if you said what is a classic Christopher Nolan film, you would look at Inception. So, but I think he has this tendency to kind of mix up, art house with more, well, not accessible, but a more mainstream sort of feel. Like his thing with the Batman movies they were kind of art house versions of a comic book type film. So he tends to get this sort of good, happy medium where there are certain mainstream elements to them and accessibilities. I mean, obviously, any Batman film is going to be mainstream, really, just by the fact it's a Batman film. But there are dramatic, big action set pieces and stuff. But at the same time, you do get a more sort of complex sort of plot going on, and they're a bit more character driven. So I think for a while he's been doing this kind of middle ground between mainstream and being also what they call an auteur, being giving more complex, sophisticated plots. Obviously with Inception it was a big science fiction sort of mystery, like dreams within a dream, and there was a whole complex narrative going on, and the sort that you can dissect and come away from and say, okay, there's things to try and work out on further viewings, and a lot of great films have that. So it brings you to Tenet, and I do wonder a bit if this, the process of making the film, it's quite a hard plot to sum up. So I'll just say, then you have John David Washington in the lead role. He was really great in BlacKkKlansman. That's what I know him from before this. And he plays this character who at the beginning is recruited by this secret organization. And it starts off with him and a bunch of others sort of doing this kind of heist at this opera. We open with, it's like an orchestra type thing setting, and he essentially sacrifices himself rather than giving up. They're kind of attacked and kidnapped by the Russians, and he sacrifices himself rather than give up the rest of the members of his team. He agrees to take this pill, which is basically supposed to kill him. So he sacrifices himself, and it appears as though he's dead. And there's you get the Martin Donovan character who, when he wakes, it's welcome to the afterlife sort of thing. But so he's saved, and then he's recruited into the kind of the American side of things. And what we then get is we get a Cold War plot, but like a twist on it, like where they're saying, well, we're going to nuclear war with the Russians, basically. But what they do is they use science fiction into the plot to do with time travel, to do with like predicting just science surrounding like weapons and bullets. And so we get into stuff about things kind of going backwards and them anticipating certain events. And there's a plot which takes up a big part of the middle of the film with an arms dealer, a rich arms dealer played by Kenneth Branagh, and the John David Washington character like forms a relationship with like his name's Andre, the Branagh character, his girlfriend, played by Elizabeth Debicki, who I like a lot too. But there's a relationship there where she basically starts helping like the American side of things, and so there's all sorts of time travel type elements mixed in with like this sort of nuclear war, arms deal type plot. And Debicki, her character Kate, or Kat I think it becomes quite sympathetic and starts helping the John David Washington character, whose partner is played by Robert Pattinson. They have like a partnership. I mean, this is going to be a non-spoiler review, really. I'm just gonna like give my general thoughts, but I think that is a very basic plot synopsis. But basically, it's a very in some of the science fiction elements, it is a very sort of complex movie, and it does get into a lot of timey-wimey type stuff. So I'm a pretty big I would say I'm a Christopher Nolan fan overall. I like a lot of his movies. I really like Memento. I liked Insomnia. I think 2 of the 3 Batman movies, at least, I think are really good. I wasn't so keen on the 3rd Batman film. And Inception, I think, is a great example of a really unique, distinct sort of blockbuster. But this left me cold. I think that's the best thing to say. I just couldn't really get into this. I think I was cold is the right term, because I just didn't really care about the characters or the plot or what was happening. And I think, unlike Inception, because obviously you can see the similarities, but I think, someone said last night who was, at the viewing, it's like him trying to do Inception again. And it does have that feel. And I guess maybe if he pulled it off, that would be different. But I'm not sure he has. I think, obviously, with Inception, although it's a complex film, it's complex in a way which is fascinating, and it feels like he's really in control of what's happening, and there's like this... It's like a brilliant sort of riddle sort of thing. But the other thing with Inception is you have really great characters. You have a really well cast set of characters as well, and there's emotion to it. You're engaged in that world. It's not just the fact that it's a really clever, really stylish film. You do engage with the characters in that film, or at least I did, and a lot of people did. But this, I just found it too hard work. I thought it was quite boring for a lot of it. It was very sort of tedious. The time travel stuff, I mean, I'm sure on some levels it makes sense, but it was very timey-wimey, and it didn't really engage me. It's a good cast, I mean, I can't really fault any of the performances. I think John David Washington really grounds that character. I think if you're getting into some of like the nuclear war type themes and just this depiction of a modern like world, and just a very ruthless and cold world, I think he was great casting, because I think his character at times is almost machine-like. And I think even when he's having conversations with other characters where there's not much action in those scenes. There's something about him where he's quite sort of passive, but he's very much in control. There is something where he always seems to kind of know what he's doing, even when he's meant to be kind of confused or not sure what's happening. And so when you see him go into action mode almost, it is very machine-like. He almost knows what to do, and he just snaps into it. It's a really brilliant performance from him, because there are some great action scenes. Like there's a scene with a cheese grater, which is really cool, which looks very physical. And the action scenes are brilliant. I think Nolan does action better than most directors. There's just a distinct sort of way he puts these scenes together. There's a brilliant rhythm to them. I mean, it opens with, like the orchestra scene, which is just amazing. And I thought, well, if this is going to be the standard of the film, then I'm going to like this film, because there is just something very unique about the way he puts the orchestra scene together. But yeah, the action scenes are good. I think as it goes on, they become less good, just because I think they sort of tack on the gimmick, and it's sort of this gimmick where you have people like flying backwards or forward in time, and a lot of stuff is piled on. I mean, the action scenes are very good, but I think over the course of 2.5 hours, especially when you've got this kind of gimmick sort of worked into it, it did become quite sort of tiresome. But the cast in general were very good. I really liked the partnership with Washington's character and Patterson's. He's good, and I think Patterson gets the measure of it, because he is quite a little bit kind of like sort of slick and kind of vampiric, and there are sort of murky parts to his character as things move on, but they had good chemistry. I enjoyed their partnership, and I could almost see them like being in like a buddy cop type movie. Yeah, I could see them doing like a Lethal Weapon type reboot, so that would be cool. So I enjoyed that. I liked Elizabeth Debicki. I don't think her character has enough to do at the time. At times, it's obviously an important character, but just some of her stuff I thought was a bit undercooked, a bit underwritten. I wanted a bit more of I don't know, oomph to her character, for lack of a better word. It's a good cast. I mean, the one notable exception, and I'm not sure if it's his fault, but Kenneth Branagh as Andre, I thought was absolutely awful. He is dire. He's just doing this. It's like Kenneth Branagh, but with a fake Russian accent, a ropey Russian. It's not a terrible accent, but it's just whatever. But he is really bad, because I think the problem is, he's even meant to be like this really menacing sort of, just complete arsehole of like a playboy, or he's meant to be something a bit more pantomime-ish and over the top. And the problem is he doesn't really do either. He's just like really bland. And some of his dialogue is just awful. Like at one point he has a line about, a tiger sort of thing, and kind of uses that as a metaphor, and it's an awful line, and he's just really bland in that role. It might have been the way the character's written, but it's just really flat. And I think Andre, the character, just felt like he was out of the different movies, whereas I think everyone else, the other characters, sort of felt like they belonged in this movie, in this world, and he just didn't. I was pretty much bored every time Andre was on screen, because I think there is a side of this which is meant to be silly, a side of this film which is meant to be like farcical and hammy, and it is going for a more enjoyable blockbuster type feel, but it never really does enough with that. And I think Andre's a good example, because I mean, if he wasn't going to be menacing, and there's nothing menacing about him. There's no threat from him at all, really, in my opinion. Then they could have gone the other way and just made him like hammy and entertaining, but they didn't do that neither. So I think this is where this movie fails, because it's clearly gone for like this mix of blockbuster, but also, you know, highbrow science fiction mystery, which obviously Inception did so well, but it just fails. It doesn't pull it off because it doesn't get the right balance. So Andre was boring. I thought a lot of the plot with him and Becky's character was quite dull and dragged out. And I think in general the characters, I wasn't engaged with them, even though I liked Washington, I liked Patterson in it, and there were other characters, but even those characters, the two main ones in a way, I thought if you take the performances out of it, then I thought those characters were very kind of wooden and cardboard, and just not a lot to it. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. Not a lot to draw me into it. And the kind of timey-wimey science fiction stuff, I thought it was an example of Nolan just being a little bit too clever by half, and it never drew me in. It dragged on and on. I think there was a lot of bad dialogue, because there's this line later on with Becky's character where Andre like accuses her, you know, you're a cold-hearted bitch, and she responds by saying, my heart's not cold. And it's like, come on, what is that? That is a bad dialogue. That is a bad piece of dialogue. And I think it's a badly written film. I think that's the problem. And yeah, it just dragged. I just felt unengaged largely with it. Obviously, it was technically good and all that, but I think in this sort of film, I think you have to be engaged with the plot and characters, and I largely wasn't. It was a huge disappointment. Now, at the end, you do actually get a nice little twist, but I think, obviously, when the rest of the film largely doesn't work so well for you, then a good twist isn't really gonna save that. I think there were long sections of this which I did find quite boring and just pointless, like characters or dialogue or subplots. I can't really, without spoiling it, I can't really go into details. But it's not like Inception, as I said. When you come out of Inception, you're not going to understand it all. You're not going to like have the full sort of picture, but you kind of don't care, because you've just been taken on a really enjoyable, fascinating, bizarre ride, and you want to watch it again so that you can figure new stuff out. So with Inception, it doesn't matter if you don't understand it, because you're still going to be dazzled. You're still going to be swept along. In this, for me, it was the opposite. This was baffling, but in a bad sort of way. This was kind of baffling in an empty, like shallow sort of way, where you do question if he's just trying to be a bit too clever. And it just doesn't have the emotion of Inception, in my opinion, or the character like depth of Inception. So yeah, Tenet, I really wasn't a fan. Now, the only thing I'll say is then I will go back and watch this again, and because, I mean, to be honest, I maybe didn't go into it in the best frame. I'd had very little sleep the previous 2 nights. And it does strike you as a movie which you should watch again. And it is that kind of movie where maybe things will start appearing the second time, and that might make me warm to it, but it might make me think, okay, this is better than I first thought. But on the first viewing, yeah, it's a massive letdown. I think it's poor. It just didn't do it for me. So disappointing, and maybe my least favourite Christopher Nolan film at the moment. That could change on another viewing, but at the moment. So 4 out of 10 for me. Sorry, but that's my feelings. So that's Tenet. So if you've seen the movie, then please let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Let me know how you think it ranks with other Christopher Nolan films. Is this one of his best films? You know, I've seen 5-star reviews for it. Does it justify that? Or do you agree with me that it's one of his weaker films? Let me know what you think overall. And like and subscribe if you are new to the channel. Help keep these movie reviews coming. And I'll see you guys again soon. Take care and goodbye.